This is a commenting upon the comments type video, which means that there are comments out there. This is one of those days when I've gone straight to the comments because I felt like it, and if I thought it would be really cool. Yes, I'm recording this in 3D, aren't I groovy? Obviously the 3D on this video is optional. You can use the little button on the bottom right hand side of your screen, which is the shape of a cogwheel, and you can click on that and opt in or opt out of the 3D and choose whatever type of groovy 3D goggles you would like to wear or like to use, or not, as the case may be, which is always the case whenever I'm broadcasting in 3 dimensions. Okay, this is a occult based question. It says, "Hey Nick, can you do a video on your views of relics, amulets and talismans, and also your view of Eucharistic transmutation, etc." Alright, well, let's just try and clear up a few things about the word Eucharist. It essentially means just thanksgiving. Okay, it's just a form of celebration through action, which involves a lot of, if not all of your senses, for the purposes of helping you to hold your mind on a particular subject. But it is essentially a form of Thanksgiving feast, which has been reduced, MP3'd, compressed into a very short action or activity. Just like most forms of religion or theology, it doesn't actually matter all that much. But there are people in the world who have tried to make this matter much more than it actually should for their own particular purposes, whether that's to do with promoting a particular religion or cult or particular theological interpretation. These things don't actually matter too much, apart from when you're dealing with the subject of psychology and how various things can have an impact upon the mind. Because making a change in your perspective, your understanding of a particular thing, or indeed immersing yourself in a particular concept, can do you a lot of good, or possibly harm, as the case may be. Depending upon the concept, the ideas present within the concept, and how the concept is being expressed or delivered straight to your own mind or subconscious, for instance. If you were on a purely normal, mundane level, going through your day being in a state of resentfulness and bitterness and anger and frustration and thinking the most horrific thoughts in the world, then that will probably have a pretty negative impact upon your behavior in the outer world at some unguarded point in time, when your presence of mind or your control over yourself has somehow been diminished. If you were to periodically, throughout the period of the week or the month or the day, take a particular action or do a particular action which contains some very positive concepts in it to do with giving thanks, being tolerant, forgiving, understanding, bringing something positive into you, then that may well, on a psychological level, have an impact over an extended period of time. Obviously not just once. If you just do it on one afternoon when you're bored because TV's crap, or it's something to do before work starts, and you happen to have a night of insomnia and you were up 2 hours earlier, then essentially the likelihood of you getting any form of personal change from it is as close to zero as makes no friggin' difference. What we're talking about here is generating for yourself a way of life which you have intelligently and constructively crafted to bring about a particular change in your very being. You can of course choose to put more effort into it or put less effort into it, but the more effort you put into thinking about the concept, then one would assume that the more benefits you'll probably get from it in the long term. This is still relatively hypothetical. I do not believe that there's been any hard and fast scientific studies done purely upon the formula of the Eucharist applied to psychology and how it can transform characters and people and attitudes and mentalities. But on the other hand, there's enough information out there which you can Google upon suggestion, upon positive reinforcement and all that kind of stuff, which will essentially give you enough faith that there is possibly a reason or rationale to perform this particular variety of activity if you feel comfortable with it. Not a problem. Everything else is more or less the same. Okay, there are individuals who rely a little too heavily on things such as relics and talismans for the power, but these are typically slightly off-the-wall individuals, possibly even rather unhinged. There are some people who try and present themselves as being great occultists who basically know as close to nothing as you could possibly get. But they happen to have spent a fortune in New Age shops and the like, and have lots of wonderful images out on their walls, and lots of books on their shelves, and lots of toys and talismans of all different types, and all the jewellery and all the rest of that, which is being attributed to various different forms of allegedly supernatural power. But in practice, they are just things which have something about their imagery which has some form of connection to a certain form of mythology, and that's all. So if I didn't have a strong emotional bond to something from the Nordic pagan religion, then would I necessarily get the full emotional or intellectual or subconscious benefit of the image of the knot of the slain? The answer to that would probably be no. I think, well, that's a load of quaint bullshit that somebody else does, and it's nothing at all to do with me, and it's nothing to do with the way in which I think or in which I see the world. But if I was someone who was heavily involved in the religion of Odin, Vali and they, and I had immersed my mind over a period of many, many years, absorbing this and taking on board various holographic universe theories about how images may or may not spread a certain level of meaning throughout the universe, or connect to something, or are these symbols which have their own energy, whatever that means. Again, this week, because it's just a phrase that people use and it's not really qualified or gone into in any real depth, and there's no real explanation or research or anything done into what this phrase actually means and how it applies to the subjects of the runes or whatever. I'm going off on one of my mad ranty tangents, so I think I'll just quickly find my inner center and inner peace. If you were someone who would immerse yourself in that kind of thinking or theology, then one would assume that images would have much more power on you, not necessarily or just on a superficial level, and not necessarily in a black and white level, but in accordance with the way in which you had actually understood them. I'm going to give you an extreme example from my life, just to demonstrate what a real, ordinary human being I am, with all my flaws and all the rest of it. Many years ago, which I'm sure some of you people remember from the days when I was on YouTube then, I had this period of time of like not sleeping for ages. I was also very malnourished, I was also very ill at the time, and that's when I got involved in all the conspiracy theory thinking, and especially all of the zeitgeist interpretation of Christianity. And then eventually Christmas came up, and I went with my parents to a church, because that's what, that's what they do on Christmas time, not because they're totally heavily involved in Christianity. It's just like a British tradition to go to church at Christmas, not necessarily as any other time of the year. And there was me with all of the astrotheology inside my head, all of the kind of zeitgeist thinking, and I was looking at all the imagery around the church, and I was interpreting it. I could feel myself interpreting everything from a very David Ickean type way, which was obviously in retrospect really rather shocking, and I'm glad I managed to pull myself out of it one way or another. But my point here is, when you've immersed your minds in a particular form of understanding, then symbols will have a particular effect upon you and a particular meaning to you, as opposed to if the imagery is not connected to or has not been interpreted by your religious learning. I mean, I could do more of a teenage video here, and I could, make something with my hands, and tie a couple of bones together with a piece of string and cover it in wax and do a little ritual over it for you if you wanted. The problem with that is it would make a great video, it would make a great bit of online theatre. But would it actually help you to understand the fact that if there is any initial power and influence which can be exerted by a talisman on a person, that it has to start with personal interpretation first, and from that then one can assume that other influences would be able to manifest themselves. Not necessarily supernaturally, although if you do get the occasional supernatural type experience, then maybe your mind can wander and think, well, maybe this connects with that, connects with that, connects with that, connects with that, and then hey presto, maybe there's something else which we could attribute to all these weird things, which might be the case or might not be the case, we still don't know. Okay? And when something is unknown, it remains unknown no matter what we think we know. As long as you remember that, you're going to be okay. If you forget that, you're going to think yourself under the table, and bad things can happen to you intellectually and emotionally, and it can't be all that good. Keep cool, chillax,